On 1600 WWRL.
Hey, it's Randy Rhodes here, and I'm very excited about WWRL's new nightly lineup. Equality Pride Radio, celebrating New York's LGBT community weeknights from 10 to midnight. Equality Pride Radio speaks to gays and straight allies like me. Finance, politics, legal issues, health and wellness, relationships, and of course entertainment. Equality Pride Radio on WWRL AM 1600 and WWRL1600.com. Don't miss it.
1600 AM WWRL.
WWRL, sharing and celebrating the LGBT community's ideas, energy, and accomplishments.
And that is what it means here in New York to treat people fairly in the eyes of the law.
New York City.
New York City. This is Randy Rhodes, and I love hearing from you on the air. Let's continue the dialogue online. Join us at WWRL1600.com.
1600
WWRL.
WWRL, sharing and celebrating the LGBT community's ideas, energy, and accomplishments.
6 months, Sonara?
This is a long relationship.
It sure is. We've had so many guests. That first show was so crazy. The bobby pins and your phony pony upset the airwaves.
Let me tell you, before we went on air for the first time that Thursday, we planned it. We had pie charts.
Yes.
It was colored in, and this is what we're going to talk about. We were ready to go. Pie chart messed us up.
It was still a great show. And how about the beginning of the show? We didn't know we were on air.
Oh, that's right.
And we're like, we're not on air, are we? And then I got tweets and texts, yes, boo, you are on air. And I'm like, oh, Lord.
So that's when we decided to blame everything on my phony pony, and that's when the phony pony came into play. And it's a legend now on the Clay Cane Live.
Listen to Clay Cane Live every Thursday at 11 p.m. on WWRL 1600 and online at WWRL1600.com.
1600
WWRL.
New York. An Access One communications radio station.
Yetta Kurland's on the air. It's Yetta Kurland live. Yetta Kurland, listening.
Good evening and welcome everyone to this week's edition of Yetta Kurland Live. I am your host, Yetta Kurland, and tonight we will be joined by the Executive Director of Citizen Action of New York, Karen Scharff, as well as the editor of Title, Occupy Theory, Occupy Strategy. His name is Yates McKee. I first want to thank our media partners, Go Magazine, Labor Press, the Soho Journal, Westview News, City and State New York, and the New Civil Rights Movement for helping make this show happen, as well as our community sponsors, the Ritz and Whole Earth Bakery. You can pick up a copy of Westview News at 69 Charles Street. Please check out Go Magazine at your local newsstand or at gomag.com. City and State New York is online at cityandstatenewyork.com. The Soho Journal at sohojournal.com. The New Civil Rights Movement you can find at the newcivilrightsmovement.com. And Labor Press is at laborpress.org. Also, you can listen to us live stream at WWRL1600.com. And please join us on Facebook at Yetta Kurland Live. You can reach us on Twitter at Yetta Kurland and check us out on the Huffington Post at huffingtonpost.com/Yetta. This week in the news, Uganda moved closer to passing a bill to outlaw homosexuality and even LGBT people themselves. The bill includes penalties of up to life in prison for being gay. A movement has begun to grant asylum to all LGBT Ugandans here in the United States. Meanwhile, President-elect of Mexico, Enrique Peña Nieto, visited Barack Obama in Washington as hopes are running high for real immigration reform after the huge Latina turnout in this month's elections. Other conversations in Washington were perhaps not as polite as the Tea Party and other hardline Republicans continued to use the so-called Fiscal Cliff to try to undermine programs for Medicare, to school lunches and more. Here in New York, the political landscape continues to change. Manhattan Borough President and former Yetta Kurland Live guest, Scott Stringer, announced that he would not run for mayor, but rather for the comptroller's job, putting into play a whole host of other potential moves from other potential candidates in the upcoming 2013 election cycle. And Albany was in turmoil, surprise, again, as a series of uncounted election results and party switching has thrown the leadership of the state Senate into doubt. We'll be talking about debt, about politics, and more with Karen Scharff, as well as Yates McKee, right here on Yetta Kurland Live, WWRL 1600, Equality Pride Radio. Please call in with questions or comments. 212-868-0975 is the number to do so. Again, 212-868-0975. Let's start with our first guest, Karen Scharff. She is the executive director of the important organization Citizen Action of New York. It's a grassroots membership organization taking on a range of big issues that are at the center of transforming American society. She's been involved in coordinating New Yorkers' response to this so-called Fiscal Cliff, which we'll get into in detail. I'm thrilled to bring that it brings her to the Yetta Kurland show tonight. If you've got questions or comments for Karen, please call in now at 212-868-0975. Again, that number is 212-868-0975. Karen, welcome to Yetta Kurland Live.
Hi, Yetta. Thanks for having me tonight.
Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule up in Albany to come talk to the folks here in New York City.
Happy to be able to do it.
So, first of all, I guess for our listeners who maybe aren't as plugged into Republican speak, shall we say, what is the so-called fiscal cliff? Maybe you could explain it for us.
Sure. As you said, there's a lot of talk about this fiscal cliff, and the Republicans want us to think that, you know, the country's broke and we've got to slash Medicaid, Medicare, other social programs in order to solve that problem. But it's not true. The fiscal cliff is created by Congress as a way of putting off decisions and as a way of putting pressure for spending cuts. What is happening is at the end of December, the tax cuts that were passed during the Bush era, what's called the Bush era tax cuts, the tax cuts that were passed when Bush was president, are set to expire December 31st. When they originally passed these tax cuts, they were given that end date. And if nothing is done, if nothing happens in Congress, then as of January 1st, we go back to the old tax rates from the Clinton era.
Wait, let me stop right there, because it's not like this is suddenly. When I hear so the fiscal cliff, I think of like Chicken Little and the sky is falling down.
Right.
This isn't like they just found out about this and it's the doing of Barack Obama, I think is what you're saying, right?
I mean, these were passed 10 years ago. They were given a 10-year timeline. Honestly, it was a fiscal trick by Bush to make it look like they weren't going to cost us that much by giving them a time limit. And now the time limit's up and the tax cuts expire, and, you know, Congress has to make a decision about whether to continue them or end them. If Congress does nothing, the tax cuts end, and yes, it's a tax increase, but it's a tax increase that just takes us back to where we were during the Clinton era when we actually had a pretty successful, robust economy.
Yeah.
Our belief is that we should continue some of these tax cuts, though, and keep the tax rates for the middle class where they are right now. You know, extend the middle-class tax cuts, but it's time to end the tax cuts that we're providing to the wealthiest people in our country. The top 2%, you know, during the election, President Obama campaigned saying we're going to stop the tax cuts for the top 2%,
right,
the wealthiest Americans, and that's we think that that's what should happen because we actually need those funds to solve the other problem that the fiscal cliff refers to, which is as another way of kind of getting out of having to make hard decisions, and really the Republicans' technique to stop the Obama agenda. They also passed this thing called sequestration, which I won't get into the details of, but the basic point is it was a deal that said if Congress doesn't do anything, then lots of spending cuts automatically happen across the board. And that would be bad, and those spending cuts shouldn't happen, and Congress does need to act to stop them.
These are two words I don't usually say in the same sentence, but this is pretty smart of the Republicans.
Yeah, it is ironic.
It's like a lot of double negatives and undoing tax stuff, renewing tax. I mean, they've set it up in a really kind of smart way.
Right, they have. They've made it so that they can scare us all because they can say, like, hey, if we don't take any action, we go over the cliff, then all these things are going to get cut, and your taxes are going to go up at the same time.
You said
it sounds scary. The reality is the solutions are pretty simple. Extend the tax cuts for the wealthiest. That gives us an extra $1 trillion and allows us to stop some of these really bad spending cuts. And that solution, you'd think that, you know, we didn't just have an election where the voters actually made a choice. The Republicans act like this is a really hard decision. It's not a hard decision. The election presented a clear choice between two very different visions for our country and for our economy and for the decisions to be made about this so-called fiscal cliff. Voters chose
who they wanted to represent them.
The Obama agenda, which was an America that works for everyone, not for the wealthy few, where everyone plays by the same rules, where we pay our fair share of taxes, and they rejected the Romney top-down economic policies going back to the Bush years that wrecked our economy.
And it's almost as if, Karen, the Republicans aren't listening. Shocking, right?
Yeah, shocking.
You're listening to Karen Scharff, the Executive Director of Citizens Action of New York. Call in with questions or comments. Karen, we got a bunch of folks calling in already. The number to do is 212-868-0975. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your ideas about the sky falling, also known as the Fiscal Cliff. Before we go to our first caller, though, I think you said something really important, which is that this is not the way to solve or be proactive in terms of smart fiscal planning. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you meant by that? In fact, isn't it true that if we're cutting these types of programs, we're actually going to be causing long-term bigger financial problems? And maybe you could tell us a little bit about what specifically the cuts are that they're talking about and how that's going to actually impact us.
Yeah, I mean, they're talking about cuts across the board, really, in every government spending program, whether it's the big ones we all know about, Medicare, Medicaid, or whether it's the specific state-to-net programs, whether it's for seniors, people with disabilities, low-income people, working New Yorkers, infrastructure, transportation, I mean, really across the board.
The unnecessary things.
Right.
Transportation, education. We could probably do without those things. Yeah. Which, of course, those things don't create jobs, which then create spending, which then re-stimulates the economy or anything like that.
Well, that's the thing, is that the Republicans don't want to admit that this is really a choice between an austerity economics, which is not working and continues to make our economy worse and worse, or prosperity economics that really focuses on investing in our economy, investing in people, investing in infrastructure, transportation, clean energy, education to build broader prosperity.
Very, very well said. Very well, and I think that's exactly right. Let's go to our first caller. We're going to go to Eileen in Pennsylvania. Eileen, welcome to Yetta Kurland Live. You're on the air.
Hi, Yetta.
Hey,
yeah, I'm listening to you all the way in Pennsylvania, so you're reaching out to across the borders.
Great. Well, thanks for calling in. Thanks for listening, and thank you, Pennsylvania, for delivering Obama to us.
Oh, we loved it.
Yeah.
We loved it. What an exciting night.
Yeah.
Karen, here's something I just want to know your opinion on. I feel like Obama has called the bluff on these guys because, he's kind of sitting back, and they have to know if they let this happen, some of them are up for re-election in 2014, correct?
Correct.
And I feel like he should just completely call their bluff on it, let the whole thing happen, and then we can turn around and blame them all and get them all voted out of office.
Well, it's a little bit of a mixed bag, because we don't want to cause total chaos just to get them out of office in 2 years. But I think your basic point is right, which is he is calling their bluff, and I hope that he continues to call their bluff, because, if as I said, if the Congress does nothing, if the President refuses to give in to the Republicans, if the Democrats who control the Senate refuse to give in to the Republicans, then there's an across-the-board tax increase. And then at that point, they can come back in January and, pass the middle-class tax cuts without the tax cuts for the wealthy. And I think in some ways, we even have more leverage in January than we have right now. And so I don't see any reason why the President or the Senate should give in to the Republican threats to take us over the cliff. They really have nothing to threaten at this point.
Right, and it's a lame duck session, so we have a really very robust presidency, and we have a lot in terms of certainly the Senate and even potentially in the Congress. What do you think the biggest obstacle for this is going to be?
Well, I mean, certainly the problem is that the House is still controlled by the Republicans,
right.
And in order to continue the middle-class tax cuts and in order to end the spending cuts that are in this so-called sequestration proposal, there does have to be action taken. So whether it's taken before December 31st or whether it's taken in January, at some point action does need to be taken, because it will be bad for the economy in the long run if nothing is done. So at some point, the President and the Senate and the House Democrats have got to get the House Republicans to do something. But I do think the leverage is all on our side at this point, and that we shouldn't give in to their demands that we continue tax cut for the wealthiest Americans.
You are listening to Karen Scharff, the Executive Director of Citizens Action of New York, here on Yetta Kurland Live, WWRL 1600. Please call in with questions or comments. We want to hear from you. 212-868-0975. Karen, we're going to go to our next caller, who is often a guest here on Yetta Kurland Live, Mark Hannay from Metro New York, Healthcare for All. Mark is also very involved, I know, on this issue. Mark, welcome to Yetta Kurland Live. Thanks for calling in this evening.
Well, thank you for inviting me to call in.
So I know that you have normally the four corners of your area of expertise that we often have you on the show is to talk about Healthcare for All campaign, and healthcare in New York. So I guess my question to you is the fiscal cliff, does the fiscal cliff impact healthcare, and how does that do that here in New York?
Well, as Karen was saying, it affects a whole variety of social programs, and squarely in the fight over those social programs, either in the sequestration process or in the whole argument over deficit reduction, sits two major health care programs: Medicare, the program for the elderly and long-term disabled, and Medicaid, the program for low-income people, which also provides a lot of services for people with disabilities and the elderly.
And people who can't otherwise afford.
Pregnant women, and a whole lot of folks get health care through Medicaid.
Let me ask you a question. It's like, I guess my question sounds pretty simple. Like, why are the Republicans so bent on attacking Medicaid and Medicare? Like, what is it about Medicaid and Medicare that's so threatening? They want to privatize it, they want to do this, they want to get rid of it, they want to cut it. What about it is so threatening to Republicans?
Ideological. The right wing in this country has never liked social insurance programs such as Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and they've tried to do whatever they can for 75, 80 years now to kind of cut them back or privatize them. So that's one thing. The second thing is that they are significant components in our federal budget. And there's smart ways that we can control health care costs and not so smart ways to control health care costs.
I agree. Let me ask you a question. Maybe you or Karen knows the number. Is the budget for health care, or I should say Medicaid and Medicare, greater or less than the budget for military expenditures? Do you know?
I don't know. Do you know that, Karen?
You know, I don't either.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
It is a good question. Maybe one of our callers will know. So Mark, talk to me a little bit about some of the work that you've been doing to try to address this issue.
Well, we've been working with organizations like Karen, Citizen Action, and a whole variety of unions and community groups to actually mount a response here in New York to this Fiscal Cliff negotiation process that's happening in Washington right now, to actually get people mobilized and taking action. Unlike previous election cycles when the election was over and everything kind of dissipated, all the forces that were mobilized around the election process have completely pivoted and refocused their energies now on this Fiscal Cliff fight in Congress. And so there's a whole campaign that's come together. We had a really good meeting a couple weekends in Albany, a couple weeks ago in Albany, where a whole variety of forces came together, and then last week we had a meeting here in New York City where a whole variety of forces, and there's a whole campaign that's mobilizing here in New York to really pressure our two senators, Senator Schumer and Senator Gillibrand, to continue to be the champions that they've always been for us on these issues.
What has their response been to the Fiscal Cliff stuff? Have they been good on this? Have you seen any movement from their offices?
Well, they've been saying some good things so far, and maybe, Karen, if you want to chime in here, and there's a group of us that will be meeting with Senator Schumer himself in a couple of days, so we'll know a little bit more after that.
Senator Gillibrand had signed on to a letter that a number of progressive senators signed on to, laying out basic principles of, that we agree with in terms of, ending the tax cuts for the rich and preserving social programs.
That's fantastic.
And Senator Schumer has in the past taken similar positions, though, we definitely urge your listeners that are from New York to call and make sure that they stick to those positions, and not only stick to those positions, but really champion them in the Senate.
Yeah, actually, let's get some information out. If they want to get involved, we have listeners. If they want to get involved, where can they go? Are there websites that they can go? Mark, is there something that's happening where just folks, residents, and people even outside the New York City area can take part?
Well, the whole national campaign around this has a website called theaction.org. So wherever you are in the country, you can go there, find out information about how to plug into what's going on in your area. There's also a Facebook page called Join the Action. So people can go to either one of those places. Here in New York, you can go to the Citizen Action website. It's citizenactionny.org/showdown. We'll get you to a whole page of activities that's happening here in New York. There's also the Strong Economy for All Coalition that's here in New York. If you go to strongforall.org, there's a whole lot of information there. Another national website would be americansfortaxfairness.org, which has a lot of good information on it. So those are some places people can go to find out.
That's great. It sounds like there's a lot of responses, both on a local level as well as a national level. Karen raised a good point earlier in the show. it just seems like the Republicans aren't listening. There was a mandate, if you will, when Barack Obama was reelected. This is one of the critical issues and the platforms that both of the candidates ran on. It seems clear what the American public want. Is this an end run around that? And specifically, and maybe this is just because I'm a little bit insulated in New York, which happens to be a highly Democratic environment. But are they continuing to make caricatures of themselves? This Fiscal Cliff thing, it just seems so silly, not thought out. They use big words like sequestration, and then we're supposed to think that it has some sort of authority or validity. Is this going to get any kind of traction, or do you think that this will just end up being another thing that, like, binders of women and just like another kind of almost parody of Republican ideology?
I do think there is a real danger that they will. I think the fear that we have is that the Republicans will stick to their ideology, and as much as we think it makes no sense at all, obviously there's big parts of the country that agree with them, and a lot of the people that are still in the House represent those parts of the country, and they'll dig their heels in, motivated especially by the more right-wing Tea Party members of the House, and refuse to do what needs to be done for the good of the country. Now, we're going to be doing a lot of work the next few weeks, and already have been, not only to make sure that our senators stay strong and take a very strong position, but also to make sure that these House Republicans that are from our state in New York get pressure from their constituents to do the right thing. And we're starting to see movement on that. Already Representative Gibson, who's actually my congressman, and Representative King from Long Island have both given indications that they're going to back off from the right-wing Norquist tax, no new taxes pledge, and be willing to stop tax cuts for the wealthy. Although they're not where we need them yet, but they're definitely beginning indications of moving off of the real, adamant Republican line that we've got to give tax cuts to the wealthy.
Interesting. And as we were speaking, Mark, a listener emailed in and said that, according to them, military and homeland security and intelligence costs are $900 billion. Medicaid and Medicare is, I'm going to say only, it's still significant, but it's $800 billion. So we spend $100 billion more in military than we do in health care for our own people, proactive health care for our own people, and yet the Republicans seem so bent on attacking and getting rid of Medicaid and Medicare here in the United States.
Yeah, I just want to alert your listeners to a couple things that are coming up this week if they want to really get active in this campaign. One is that on this Friday we're doing statewide call-ins to both Senator Gillibrand's and Schumer's offices, as well as to your local member of Congress, so expressing your opinions on this issue. And if you go to the websites that we mentioned earlier, there's an 800 number courtesy of the AFL-CIO that people can use to call the Capitol switchboard and get a message through. On that same day, from 1 to 2 p.m., we're holding a quote-unquote Twitter rally, where people are going to be tweeting about this in that hour, tweeting at their members of Congress and using a few hashtags to kind of create a groundswell of activity within the Twittersphere, as it's often referred to. Mm-hmm. And then on this coming Saturday, we are targeting across the state members of the New York congressional delegation who voted for the Ryan House budget in the past. Around this issue of the tax cuts for the rich. And here in New York City, our member of Congress that we'll be focusing on will be Representative Michael Grimm, who represents Staten Island and parts of southern Brooklyn. We'll be holding a People's Yacht trip. We're all taking the Staten Island ferry from Manhattan over to Staten Island. We're taking the People's Yacht.
The People's Yacht.
We'll be joined by an organization called the Patriotic Millionaires, who are wealthy people who believe it's time to restore tax fairness in our system, and that tax rates should go up for wealthier Americans. And we'll be doing a rally at 12:45 on the steps of Staten Island Borough Hall, where we'll be featuring the stories of Staten Islanders, particularly those who have been adversely impacted by Superstorm Sandy.
Yeah, that's a whole other story.
And posing the question to Representative Grimm, is he going to stand up for tax cuts for millionaires, or is he going to stand up for a fair budget that supports recovery and relief efforts and adequate funding for FEMA and New York City to recover? And
Michael Grimm, the Republican, just recently reelected, facing a challenge from Mark Murphy. He ran on a platform of being there for the little guy, so we'll see. It's a good question.
We invite people to join us either on the trip over to Staten Island, or if you live on Staten Island, to join us at Borough Hall for the rally. And then afterwards, we'll be working with an organization called Make the Road New York to do some volunteer relief activities on Staten Island for people who've been adversely affected by the hurricane.
Obviously, Staten Island, one of the big places that there's been a lot of problems and impacts with Hurricane Hannay. What day is that?
That's this Saturday. So on Friday, you do the call-in and the Twitter rally, and on Saturday, you join us on Staten.
You take the yacht for the people.
Yes.
With Mark Hannay. Mark, thank you so much for calling. Thanks for coming on the show. We'll have you back again soon. You've been listening to Mark Hannay here on Yetta Kurland Live, along with Karen Scharff. Karen, I want to switch gears just a little bit. We do have many other callers as well, but you know, obviously the work that you guys do is in part kind of like, do you identify as a good government organization, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you about a more local story, the fate of kind of what's happening in the New York State Senate and the flux that's going on there. I thought I'd take advantage of having your knowledge and expertise. You know, the IDC are claiming that they are progressive Democrats. Why would they... You know, what's at play here? Obviously, we saw the Senate go into Democratic hands, you know, a few years back, and we thought we were safe, and then the whole coup happened, and now we're starting to see these rumblings. Maybe give us a little thought or your analysis of what's at play.
Sure. So, you know, kind of in a way, ironically, kind of similar to what we're talking about nationally, we had an election. New Yorkers voted for a Democratic state Senate. And in fact, really, you know, voted for a progressive agenda. I mean, voters across New York State in every contested election, in every closely contested Senate race, chose the candidate, which happened to be the Democrat, who was in favor of raising the minimum wage, passing campaign finance reform, including public funding of elections, the Reproductive Health Act, you know, reform after reform that those senators supported and that the voters voted for is what we now have a chance to get in New York State, except that we have 5 Democratic senators who are raising questions about whether or not they're going to stick as part of the Democratic majority or whether they're going to what they call caucus with the Republicans, essentially giving the Republicans the majority and the control over the Senate.
While claiming to be progressive Democrats.
Get voted on.
But they're doing it, so what they're in essence doing is giving the majority back to the Republicans, but they're kind of smart, you know, they're claiming to be progressive Democrats in the process of doing that, right?
And they're trying to kind of fudge it. So we have, you know, Jeff Klein, who's the leader of the Independent Democratic Caucus, so that's 4 of the 5 people we're talking about, out there saying, well, I want to have an effective government, so I want to caucus with the Republicans because we can work well with them. I'm not going to give them the majority. We're going to have this, you know, co-majority. We'll have our, you know, caucus of 4, and we'll have their caucus of however many Republicans we end up with, and we'll work together, and we can get things done. And he's claiming he's going to do all these issues, but that makes no sense. That's what we had for the past 2 years. And they refused to increase the minimum wage. They refused to do campaign finance reform. They refused to even take up the Reproductive Health Act. None of these things even got a chance to be debated in the Senate because the Republican majority was the obstacle. Support from the Assembly. The governor said he was in support of all of these items. The Senate Republicans would not even allow a discussion, and they certainly wouldn't allow a vote in their House. So I don't understand how Jeff Klein and his independent Democrats think there's a way that they're going to somehow get these things passed by allying themselves with the Republicans, who are the very people who have stood in the way on all these issues for the past 2 years and for decades before that. And, you know, people want to complain that it was messy when the Democrats had control, and there were things that were problems, and certainly the, you know, coup and the role that Espada played were very unhelpful and unhealthy.
Right. It just seems...
But yet the Republicans played a very active role in making that happen. I mean, they're the ones that recruited Espada. They're the ones that gave him the leverage to really challenge the Democratic majority and keep them from carrying forward their agenda. And despite all that, the Democrats during the short 2 years that they had control got a lot done. They created the Green Jobs Program. They created the Millionaire's Tax. You know, they allowed us to start regulating health insurance rates. We didn't have outrageous health insurance rate increases anymore. They did a lot of things that were good for the people of New York. The Republicans are taking us backwards, and I don't understand honestly why we have 5 Democratic senators in the state who think it's okay to go against what the voters voted for and keep us trapped by, you know, a Senate group of Senate Republicans who want to stand in the way of progress.
You know, it seems like sometimes we're our own worst enemy. There's nothing, the only word I can think of is tragic, that we have been desperately trying to regain leadership in the Senate. We seem to be able to do it. The voters, which is right? And we get there and then we're our own worst victim. And I guess I want to ask, I think it's important to also talk about this from a racial perspective and analyzing it on a race level. In 2009, I'm sure you remember, the 3 Latino senators, I think there was 1 white senator as well, switched parties and joined the GOP. That was criminal and corrupt, right? Here we have, now I'm not saying it wasn't, but here we have 4 white senators empowering, empowering what would become an all-white GOP caucus. Why are they able to portray themselves as kind of good government or bipartisan, or, you know, why is it a different narrative that we're seeing with this?
I think it's a really good point. I mean, first, the fact that they do want to create this all-white dominance of the state Senate, and we have a very diverse state, and I think our state government should reflect the diversity of our state, as should the leadership of our state government. But your other point, I think, is also a really important point that's been lost in a lot of this, which is, as you said, that when we had Latino senators saying that they wanted to do, you know, cross over the Republican line to get things that they wanted to get done, Jeff Klein, along with lots of other people, you know, myself included, you know, very much criticized them, saying that, you know, this was that they were defying the will of the voters. And so I don't think it's any more, you know, there's no way that you can say that was wrong and now it's okay for these folks to help create, you know, the white guys caucus and leadership to take control over the state Senate. And it's really... I don't really see the distinction, and to say that it's okay now and it wasn't okay then is really hard to justify. And I do think it's, you know,
it's problematic to say the least. I think we could probably have a whole show, and maybe we will, to talk about this. You're listening to Karen Scharff of Citizens Action New York here on Yetta Kurland Live. Karen, we got a bunch of callers. I'm going to try to squeeze a few more before we go to our break. We're going to go to our next caller, Jonathan from Brooklyn. Jonathan, welcome to Yetta Kurland Live. You're on the air.
Hey, Yetta. I just wanted to say thank you for everything you do. You're amazing, and look forward to great things from you.
Well, thank you.
Hey, Karen, great to have you on. My question to you, quite simply, is everybody in Washington seems to agree that tax cuts should remain, you know, permanent for certain, you know, income brackets. It seems to be like 250,000 is sort of a hot number, maybe $500,000. Why can't they separate all this fiscal cliff major package with something that everybody agrees on?
Yeah,
you know,
reasonable compromise.
Get done sort of separately.
And it's a good point because it's, you know, I think it shows where the Republicans don't really agree, because you're right that everybody, you know, says they think that we should have tax cuts for people under $250,000, and Republicans also want to have tax cuts for people over $250,000. But you're totally right; they could pass a bill for under $250,000 and then vote, you know, fight about the rest. But they don't want to allow that to happen. What's really happening is the Republicans are essentially holding hostage the tax cuts for the middle class in order to get tax cuts for the wealthy.
So there's some interesting parallels for us New Yorkers with the local things that are happening in state Senate and what's happening on a national level in terms of Republican pushback.
I think that's right. And just to, you know, in terms of the national level stuff, I just want to recommend again the Americans for Tax Fairness website, AmericansForTaxFairness.org, where you can really follow, you know, on a daily and throughout the day basis all the different things that are happening on these kinds of questions and the different changes, different proposals, who's doing what, who's saying what, and then to check on the different activities that Mark talked about earlier and things that will be happening as we go through the next few weeks on this, the Citizen Action website, www.citizenactionny.org. On the federal stuff, and we'll also have updates on our website as well on the conversation we were just having about what's happening in the state Senate.
Now, Mark talked about a number of different events that are happening. Is Citizen Action partnering with them, or are there other things that you guys are doing specifically that our listeners can get involved with?
We're partnering with the same events that Mark talked about. We're doing these December 1st events all over the state. And then we're going to have another series of candlelight vigils on December 10th, and then there's lots of activities in between. And so I just recommend that people, you know, go to citizenactionny.org, and we have a list on there of everything that's coming up, the locations, how to get involved, who the contact person is. So wherever you live in New York State, you can find things there. And if you live in other surrounding states, AmericansForTaxFairness.org or else USAction.org has information for every state in the country what's going on this.
Wonderful. I want to squeeze one last caller in. Margaret is from Greenwich Village. Margaret, welcome to Yetta Kurland Live. You're on the air.
Well, hi, Yetta, and hi,
Margaret
Karen.
Okay, I thought that was you. Hi.
Good to hear you guys on the radio tonight. I just had a couple quick comments about this fiscal cliff or slide or whatever situation. The first one
I called it Chicken Little, the sky is falling down. But
really?
Yeah.
The first is that, President Obama was speaking about this today, and he frames the tax bracket situation in a way that I think is maybe a little more useful than saying, no tax cuts for the rich, blah, blah, blah. Actually, up to $250,000, everybody gets a tax cut.
Right. Right.
Not
everybody, but 98.
No, 100% of people get a tax cut on income up to $250,000.
Right.
So if Mitt Romney makes, $31 million, he's paying a lower.
Well, he doesn't have to pay taxes if you saw his tax return. He's just smarter than all of us.
Some normal guy who has a big of say $1 million, his first $250,000 would be taxed at the lower rate.
Right.
Then once his income exceeds that, it'd be taxed at the higher rate. So, it's not.
I mean, I think the point that you're making, I think our earlier
not singling out the wealthy to be punished from the very first dollar that they're paid.
So, I mean, what you're saying, Margaret, is like there is a significant amount of room for reasonable compromise, and this is not the sky falling down, right?
No, it is not the sky falling down, and as a matter of fact, up to $250,000, everybody's tax rate would be the lower rate.
Right.
That's a really good point.
That might be just a better way of expressing it, that it's not on people who are over a certain amount. It's income over a certain amount.
Yeah.
It's arithmetic, as Bill Clinton
right.
Good point. At the convention. Now, on the subject of leverage and who has it and who has the upper hand, I think it's obvious that at the moment, President Obama and the Democrats do.
Right.
As you guys were saying, just let us go over the cliff.
Let me ask both of your opinions on this as we wrap up the segment. If we do that, I mean, do the Republicans have enough power in the Congress to really stop that? Meaning, do we need to actually be more compromising, or do you think that if we just were able to stand up with what we have, do you think that we would be able to push this through?
There's a little bit of a, who gives in, who's going to give in when question. It's hard to know, but I think it's important at this point that the President stands really firm as he's doing, and that the Democrats in Congress, push forward and, call the Republicans bluff and say, hey, we need to do what's good for the country. This is what the voters chose. This is what's going to bring our economy back, and we're not going to give in.
I think that's a really good point, and I think what you guys are doing, which is to amplify the issue, to put a face to it, let people understand how it relates directly to them. When you use big words like sequestering, and you kind of position it from this like it's going to sunset, we better get it right back in there.
Right.
It's this really smart way to basically either mystify it or make people misunderstand what's happening. So Karen, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. Thanks for taking time to come on the show with us this evening. We'll have you back on again hopefully soon. You've been listening to Karen Scharff here on Yetta Kurland Live. She is the Executive Director of Citizen Action of New York. Karen, if you could just give one more shout out for your website and what's going on that people can get involved in.
Sure. So the website is citizenactionny.org. That's all one word, citizenactionny.org. And on our website, you'll find a listing of all the upcoming events. And in New York City, particularly on December 1st, we've got the Staten Island action that Mark Hannay was talking about earlier at the Staten Island Ferry, and there's a whole series of actions around the state on December 1st. Wherever you live in the state, there's something going on, and then there's a number of things happening. After that, the next big New York City event is on December 6th. So if you go to citizenactionny.org, you can get all the details on where and when and contact people for every one of the events. These are all events that draw attention to the fact that what we need to do is end the tax cuts over $250,000 and stop the cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, and other essential programs that are going to refuel our economy, invest in infrastructure, transportation, education, and build broader prosperity.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Karen. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Yates McKee here on Yetta Kurland Live.
I'm always proud to be a New Yorker.
WWRL, sharing and celebrating the LGBT community's ideas, energy, and accomplishments.
But tonight, I am especially proud to be a New Yorker.
GEICO has an important message for its policyholders in the tri-state area. You didn't choose to be in the path of Hurricane Sandy, but you did choose GEICO. Our GEICO catastrophe team is ready to help. We urge our policyholders, whose cars have been damaged in the storm, to contact us. GEICO claims specialists are available 24 hours a day, every day. When you're able, contact us at geico.com or 1-800-841-3000. You chose us. We're ready to help you.
Have yourself a merry little Christmas.
Clay Aiken's Joyful Noise Tour is coming to the St. George Theater in Staten Island on Sunday, December 2nd.
Silent night.
Accompanied by a 20-piece orchestra, Clay Aiken will be performing all of your favorite holiday classics.
Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. A beautiful sight, we're happy tonight. Walking in a winter wonderland.
Clay Aiken at the St. George Theater, 35 Hyatt Street, Staten Island, Sunday, December 2nd at 7 p.m. To purchase tickets, call the St. George Theater box office at 718-442-2900. That's 718-442-2900 or online at Ticketmaster.com.
On a chapstick Christmas my true love gave to me 8 chapstick cherries, 7 peppermints, 6 green apples, 5 chapstick raspberry creams, 4 apple ciders, 3 strawberries, 2 vanilla mints, and a limited edition candy cane.
Stuff your stockings with all the great flavors of chapstick this year, all in the cough and cold aisle. Chapstick, apply happy.
An important reminder from Medicare. It's Medicare open enrollment through December 7th. Time to compare plans and see what's best for you. You don't have to change, but it's good to look. And check out the preventive benefits you get after the healthcare law, with no co-pays or deductibles, like some cancer screenings. Savings, too, like over 50% off brand-name prescriptions in the donut hole. Medicare open enrollment. Now's the time. Visit Medicare.gov or call 1-800-MEDICARE.
I want my company's network to be safer and more reliable.
Do you want to deal with multiple vendors?
No.
Are per-user fees and added feature costs okay?
No.
How about solutions that are hard to install and use?
No.
Offshore or automated phone tree support okay?
No.
Then yes, we can help.
Barracuda Networks offers the largest family of powerful, affordable security, networking, and storage solutions designed to protect business users, apps, and data. All from a single source that's easy to do business with. Protect your business. Visit barracuda.com/products to try any free for 30 days.
This holiday season, REI wants to know, why do you go outside?
For the love of peace.
Quiet. Ease.
Calm.
Lying in the snow.
For the love of running. Laughing. Hiding.
Seeking. Watching my daughter grow. For the love of comfort.
Joy.
Family.
Friends. Everyone I know.
For the love of outside. REI is where I go.
Here, guidance, inspiration. Visit REI for outdoor gifts this holiday season. Right now, we'll even include free shipping with no minimum purchase. Exclusions apply. Visit one of REI's 6 tri-state area locations or shop rei.com.
Do you have a used or vintage musical instrument at home gathering dust? Guitar Center's experts are interested in buying it from you now through Sunday. You don't even need to be a musician. Look in attics and basements because we'll pay you top dollar for qualified guitars, amps, pedals, keyboards, drums, and more. It's the Used and Vintage Gear Expo at your local Guitar Center, now through Sunday. Looking to upgrade? We'll buy qualified used and vintage gear and give you a 15% discount on new gear. You can even trade gear. Find details and your local store at guitarcenter.com.
1600 WWRL. 1600 Talk that's changing New York.
And we are back on Yetta Kurland Live, coming to you on a Wednesday night, talking about lots of different things related to debt, to the Fiscal Cliff, and our next guest is a editor of the title Occupy Theory, Occupy Strategy. His name is Yates McKee. We're delighted to have him here with us on Yetta Kurland Live. turning from the national debt to personal debt. Yates has been involved in the Occupy Wall Street's strike debt movement and is the editor of Title, Occupy Theory, Occupy Strategy. They've been getting a lot of attention lately from really great ideas, some novel approaches to the crisis of consumer debt. We're delighted to have him on the show with us tonight. If you've got questions or comments for Yates McKee, please call in 212-868-0975. Again, that number is 212-868-0975. Yates, thanks for coming on to Yetta Kurland Live.
Yetta, thank you so much for having me. Jubilant greetings from New York City.
Well, jubilant indeed. In fact, I was at your Jubilee. I guess it was about a week ago. It was incredible.
Oh, fantastic. I'm so glad that you made it.
Yeah, it was.
So you saw us jubilating then.
I saw you jubilating. I myself became a little jubilant. It was wonderful. I thought it was just really brilliant, and I think you ended up raising $5 million to be able to recover $5 million of distressed health care debt that night alone. I don't know how much.
Well, you know, as a matter of fact, we had originally conceived of that event, which was called the People's Bailout Telethon. We had originally conceived that as the kickoff party for the Rolling Jubilee, which is a project to have folks, you know, pool their resources and raise money to buy this distressed debt at pennies on the dollar in the debt market, and then to purchase it and cancel it. So that was supposed to be the kickoff party.
Right.
But before the event had even happened, we had already raised $150,000. And by the end of the night, we had somewhere in the order of like 400,000.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, so we're like, and we're still in the process of raising money now, actually.
Unbelievable. So let's back up a little. I just think it's genius. I think so. That's my editorializing. So let's just, for our listeners, what is strike debt, and tell us a little bit about kind of, you know, what I just summarized. But what are you guys doing?
Yeah. Okay. So strike debt is it's an offshoot of Occupy Wall Street that emerged last summer when a bunch of different Occupy Wall Street groups got together, including the Occupy Student Debt Campaign, Occupy Theory, Occupy Labor Outreach, Occupy University, a number of other groups got together after May Day, when we had a real, historic reclaiming of that workers' holiday, to think about what direction to take the movement. And so we got together, we brainstormed about the things that were, that different groups had been organizing around, and we thought, what is the thing that really, could bring together all these different campaigns? And a phrase that we came up with was that debt is the tie that binds the 99%. So you think about the student debt crisis, you think about the crisis around foreclosures, you think about, medical debt, you think about the credit card debt that people are forced to go into just to make ends meet. Or even you think about austerity, and municipal debt. And there's something about this, our current economy runs on debt.
Yeah, it's what gets us to work every day in the morning, right? We have to.
Yeah, indeed. And so our question was, what would it mean to build a political movement around this condition of indebtedness? And for the first step that we took was to create a space where debtors could come together and find one another. So we started out with debtors' speak-outs and testimonials, where it's very simple. All you get together and do is just to start to talk about your experience of being a debtor. It's a huge breakthrough. It's almost like a coming-out experience, because part of the experience of being in debt is to be isolated, ashamed, to feel like you have to be in the shadows.
Yeah.
So that process of coming out and becoming part of a political community of the indebted was a big first step.
I bet it was amazing to actually realize how many other people had debt. And when you just listed all those groups, universities, I understand the student debt, but when you start talking about, health care and all the ways that excessive debt slips into the lives of most Americans, it's pretty significant. Perhaps one of the nice things was to realize the community of other people who also had to struggle with that.
Yeah, most certainly. And again, the sense that you get atomized and isolated and afraid. The banks terrify you into the sense of being ashamed and isolated. So to come together and find across the spectrum of these different groups suffering from debt that there's a kind of common condition. One of our slogans is, you are not alone. Right?
Ha 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 ha. It's a double entendre.
Yeah, indeed. And so that's been a kind of a very successful meme, actually, on our Facebook page. If you go on Facebook and just look for Strike Debt, you'll find that we have a really very energetic and exciting kind of social media campaign around some of these.
Again, genius is the word that comes to mind.
We've kind of brought it into the public sphere. People are talking about it. People are excited. We've touched a nerve in a chord. So how do you build like a national movement around this? You know, that's the question we're working with now.
Well, what you did with this Jubilee, so I mean, for listeners, I guess Jubilees were something that happened years gone by, back in the 20th century, where there would be these events, or people would kind of come together in a meeting, or maybe you could explain it a little bit better. But you used that as a venue to do this whole strike debt thing that was kind of genius, because I guess you were buying back distressed healthcare debt for, as you said, pennies to the dollar. So the first amazing thing is that you were able to raise $400,000. That is a testament to the power of the Occupy movement, which has supposedly, according to naysayers, totally dissipated. It clearly is not dissipated. To be able to raise $400,000 in one evening is tremendous. But the fact that you could parlay that into $5 million of freeing people of debt that they were probably deeply burdened and overwhelmed with is even more incredible to me.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, yeah, so, I mean, in terms of the Jubilee, you know, one thing to emphasize is the fact that we're really tapping into a historic tradition. All the monotheistic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all have traditions of Jubilee, which would be, you know, a periodic cancellation of all debts, a wiping clean of the slate, and a sort of a starting over period. And that was something, you know, in many ancient societies that would happen because there was an understanding that, you know, a condition of chronic indebtedness could have very destabilizing effects on a society. But one thing that's important to emphasize, though, is that strike debt is not about forgiveness, right? We're not saying, oh, debtors have, you know, messed up, or they're morally, you know, profligate, and therefore we're going to, you know, give them a break. What we're trying to say with our analysis is that, in fact, this whole system runs on debt.
Sure.
To even survive, the 99% is forced to go into debt for the most basic things. Working 2 jobs, having to use a credit card to pay for medicine, right, or to go to the doctor. You know, student debt that lasts for like decades, you know, when in coming out of college. You know, and again, you know, the foreclosure crisis that became so...
Sure, the subprime mortgage scandal and the whole, yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Or even like, you know, payday loans.
Yeah.
The fact that there are entire communities who aren't even, you know, considered so-called credit-worthy, and have to rely on what we call these fringe financial services, you know, that affect mostly communities of color, in the same way the subprime mortgage crisis, you know, had an uneven racial impact. So this really cuts across the spectrum of, you know, economic and social justice issues in the United States, but it has this, you know, this interesting religious background as well. So we're not a religious organization,
right?
But we certainly appreciate, you know, the great traditions of the concept of Jubilee.
It's incredible. And the ability for you to take all of that and put that into the power of the very hands of the people who are being adversely impacted. When the idea that we ourselves can buy back at pennies to the dollar, it seems almost unbelievable that we can do that. And then we start to realize just how easy the 1% or the folks who are in positions of power to make money or take advantage of this predatory lending or this predatory schemes, just how easy it is for them. I just want to try to get at least one caller. We're almost out of time. We've got a bunch of callers on the line, for which I apologize to many that we're not going to be able to get to you. But let's squeeze Amy from Manhattan. Amy, welcome to Yetta Kurland Live. You're on the air, which is a couple minutes left. Thanks for calling in.
Hi. I was just following what was going on with the strike debt activities, and I was so excited to see the positive reaction. I was wondering if you had any negative pushback on what you did, because it was such a unique project, and you know, what kind of challenges you face going through this.
That's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I must say that we were pleasantly, I wouldn't say surprised. We're touching a nerve and hitting a chord with this thing of identifying debt as this crisis in the U.S. economy and people's lives. But actually, you know, we've gotten positive media coverage across the board, from The Nation magazine to Forbes and, you know, Business Insider. Now, we're not by any means trying to pander to Wall Street journalists by any means. Certainly. But the fact is that people recognize that we're touching something that is really central to the potential. We've already had a crisis around the foreclosures, and that expanding beyond that initial crisis, and now the student debt bubble that's coming up. Like, people recognize that debt is this. There's like a sort of artery.
Yeah.
The current economy that's really precarious.
And it impacts so much. I'm so sorry that we're out of time because, another part of this whole thing is kind of what's happening with Occupy Sandy and the way that the Occupy movement has just been so powerful in the way that's responded to so many of the difficulties in this country. But Yates, let's get you back on Yetta Kurland Live.
Yeah, let me say one more thing. Go to rollingjubilee.org, and also on December 16th, we're having a Strike Debt open house for the whole region of New York City and beyond. Go to strikedebt.org and our Facebook page to check those out, and you can donate at rollingjubilee.org.
rollingjubilee.org, strikedebt.org.
Yes.
Yates, thank you so much. Thanks for the work that you're doing, and thanks for coming on Yetta Kurland Live. Okay. We'll tune back in next week, Wednesday night at 10 p.m. on Yetta Kurland Live. Thanks for listening in.
The preceding program was independently produced. The views and opinions expressed were those of the program host and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of WWRL, its staff, or management.